Greetings to all. Everybody is talking is the theme of today's update concerning Israel and the Middle East. Several proposals, speeches, and conversations are taking place this week. Israel has been talking with international leaders concerning a 6-day ceasefire and re-implementation of UN Resolution 1701. Egypt has proposed a 2-day ceasefire in Gaza. The U.S. has warned Iran at the UN of serious consequences if new attacks happen. Last, but certainly not all that is under discussion, Netanyahu gave a speech comparing the current conflict, called the War of Revival, to the historic War of Independence. Beginning with talks about the re-implementation of the UN Resolution 1701. Israel also talks with international leaders concerning a 6-day ceasefire. Discussions involved Israel's Mossad chief and CIA director, William J. Burns, and aimed at securing a ceasefire in Gaza. UN Resolution 1701 was originally established to govern peace in the region post the 2006 conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. It was unanimously voted and adopted to end the war between Israel and Hezbollah. The 2006 war resulted in around 1,200 deaths in Lebanon and 160 deaths in Israel. UNIFIL peacekeepers have deployed in Lebanon since Israel's invasion in 1978. Since 2006, UNIFIL is tasked with ensuring that Resolution 1701 is upheld, including monitoring the 120-kilometer blue line demarcated by the UN following Israel's withdrawal from southern Lebanon in the year 2000. Despite UN efforts, Hezbollah has remained in the areas south of the Litani River, despite the resolution's call for their withdrawal. Hezbollah has maintained a network of tunnels in the hilly area, and sporadic clashes have occurred over the years. In 2020, the UN requested access to tunnels under the Blue Line, but peacekeepers were never given access. U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein noted that while the resolution could serve as a foundation for a ceasefire agreement, both Israel and Hezbollah must commit to its enforcement effectively. Israel's lack of trust in the UN is fueled by the problem with UNIFIL's difficulty to fulfill their duty to govern the Blue Line effectively, giving rise for Israel to question the UN's support of UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. On October 28, 2024, Israel's Knesset passed 2 laws aimed at halting UNRWA's operations within Israel and the Palestinian territories. These laws effectively prohibit UNRWA from conducting any activities within Israel, including providing essential services or operating any facilities. The finalization of these laws comes despite international pressure, including warnings from the Biden administration regarding potential humanitarian crises resulting from such legislation. The laws are set to take effect within 3 months, barring UNRWA from functioning in areas that require its aid. The stopping of operations is particularly impactful, as UNRWA has historically been a major provider of humanitarian assistance, including education, healthcare, and food aid to Palestinian refugees. Approximately 5.9 million refugees rely on UNRWA for their basic needs. Thus, this legislative move poses a serious risk of exacerbating an already precarious humanitarian situation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemns the legislation, citing it contrary to the UN Charter, emphasizing that Israel's obligations under international law cannot be altered by national legislation. Israel's concerns regarding the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, center primarily around allegations of the agency's ties to Hamas and the involvement of its staff in violent actions, particularly the October 7, 2023 attacks led by Hamas against Israel. Israel has accused a number of UNRWA employees of being affiliated with Hamas and participating in the attacks that resulted in significant violence, leading to the deaths of approximately 1,200 people and the abduction of around 250 hostages. It claims that this involvement is not just limited to isolated incidents, but rather indicates a broader infiltration of UNRWA by Hamas operatives. Israel contends there is substantial evidence suggesting UNRWA facilities are being used for military purposes by Hamas, which includes staging attacks and hiding weaponry. Israel has reported finding tunnels and weapons caches situated directly under or adjacent to UNRWA installations, thus raising concerns about the agency's neutrality and safety protocols. Israel has historically criticized UNRWA for its assistance to Palestinian refugees, arguing that the agency's very existence perpetuates the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by maintaining the notion of Palestinian refugees and their descendants without offering pathways for resettlement. This criticism intensified following the October 7th attacks, prompting Israel to accelerate its legislative actions against UNRWA, emphasizing that it must hold accountable any staff involved in terrorist activities. South of the Gaza border, Egypt has proposed a 2-day ceasefire in Gaza, designed to facilitate the exchange of hostages and promote humanitarian relief amidst the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. This proposal is significant as it aims to alleviate the severe humanitarian crisis in the region and create a pathway toward a more sustainable peace. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi suggested the ceasefire on October 27, 2024. The initiative involves the following key components: a hostage exchange where 4 Israeli hostages being held in Gaza would be released in exchange for some Palestinian prisoners currently detained by Israel. Humanitarian aid to Gaza, allowing for the delivery of essential humanitarian aid to the population in Gaza suffering hardships due to ongoing military operations and blockades. And last, follow-up negotiations. After the 2-day ceasefire is initiated, discussions are expected to resume within 10 days, aiming to establish a more permanent truce and address the ongoing conflict in a comprehensive manner. Egypt is in a precarious economic situation, intensified by the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The influx of refugees from Gaza seeking safety and resources further strains the country's already limited resources and services. The war has led to increased pressure on Egypt's economy, which is grappling with inflation, currency devaluation, and rising unemployment rates. The influx of refugees from Gaza seeking safety and resources further strains the country's already limited resources and services. In the midst of all the conversations, tensions with Iran increase after Israel's strike against their military installations. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, warns Iran of serious consequences if new attacks happen. The U.S. conveyed a strong warning to Iran regarding any new attacks against Israel or further escalation of conflict in the region. The message underscored that the U.S. would consider direct military and diplomatic consequences if Iran continued its support for militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. The U.S. official called on Iran to exercise restraint and avoid further destabilizing actions in the Middle East, and the U.S. reiterated its unwavering support for Israel's right to defend itself against threats posed by Iranian-backed groups. This statement reinforces the long-standing U.S. policy of backing Israel in its conflicts with militant organizations that threaten its security. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, gives a speech titled "The War of Revival" and compares it to the historic War of Independence. Netanyahu emphasized that just as Israel fought for its existence during the War of Independence in 1948, the current military operations against Hamas represent a similar struggle for national survival. He framed the Gaza conflict as necessary to fight and to protect the state against an existential threat posed by Hamas and its allies. By naming the current conflict War of Revival, Netanyahu sought to articulate a message of resilience and renewal. He intends for this narrative to underscore Israel's determination to overcome its adversaries and emerge stronger, drawing historical resonance with the foundational struggles of the state. The Prime Minister portrayed Hamas not only as a militant group, but as a powerful adversary seeking the annihilation of Israel. He pointed out the scale of Hamas's operations, its connections with Iran, and the strategic threats it poses to the nation's security, similar to the threats faced during the War of Independence. He used the speech to urge national unity among Israelis, asserting that overcoming this conflict requires a concerted effort by the entire country, much like the collective endeavor during the founding of the state. He emphasized the need for solidarity in the face of adversity and encouraged Israelis to support military efforts against Hamas. Acknowledging the sacrifices made by Israeli soldiers and the suffering of civilians, Netanyahu expressed his commitment to achieving a definitive victory over Hamas. He reiterated that the operations would continue until Israel achieves its objectives, paralleling the determination and resilience exhibited during the War of Independence. In concluding his speech, Netanyahu articulated a vision of a secure Israel that can ensure peace and stability in the region. He called for a future where Israeli citizens can live without the constant threat of terrorist attacks, emphasizing that the current military actions are paving the way for such a reality. And once again, that is all for now. Be sure to like and subscribe for further updates. God bless each of you, and please pray for the peace of Israel and the Middle East.